Herb. Herb is a plant. I mean, herbs are good for everything. Herb.
Hello, you made the trip to Eugene Cannabis TV. You got DanK and you got Mike here. We got our friend Mike from out of Washington, half-time Washington, half-time in Oregon. So
mostly Washington, but working down here.
So and it's a unique opportunity we have to talk about how things are going in Washington, one of the two states that legalized cannabis or the use of cannabis. So we picked up, I found an interesting story talking about the medical marijuana dispensaries up in Seattle. And I thought this would be another great opportunity to talk to Mike, because he's been in most of them. Probably not,
well, not most of them. There's over 100 up there.
I was going to say, you probably know all of them. There's 100 of them. I don't think you probably have been in all of them.
But I've been to many of them, and they run the gauntlet from being just, almost looks like corporate America in here,
Yeah.
Furniture, ambiance, and then you go into some places that look like, I don't think anybody knows this is here. Very indiscreet building. They can't advertise, so you don't really know a lot of these are there, except for the ones that have the big green cross. You see that plenty in King County.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, some interesting names. Fusion, Green Buddha, Freedom, Sweet Herbal, to name a few. This article here, they were talking about how they gone in. In fact, he said it was so bad he wouldn't even name it. But Mike knows what's the name of it.
Oh, I don't know the name. I don't want to.
Yeah. Well, he says here that he's talking about his personal experience. He says, I walk in and show my ID to a guy in a tiny room tapping away on a laptop. I sit down and wait, but two folks are ahead of me. The room is bare and contains only a couch. Customers are being buzzed through a secure door in the back room one at a time. I get into conversation about LSD with a 30-something lady and remind her that it's not legal, like pot. Then we start talking about hallucinogenic mushrooms, educating another guy who was sitting there waiting for his friend. Anyway, he goes on talking about the experiences in the waiting room, but the point I wanted to get to was he's talking about where he actually got his medicine. He says, I request 2 strains and pay $18. The bud tender is unhelpful and keeps steering me to crappier looking product than I have requested. He also is very, very slow and has a hard time performing very simple tasks, like finding the right jar of pot and taking some of the pot out of the jar and putting it in a sandwich bag, and writing the name of an alleged strain on the bag with a Sharpie. Here you go. When I get home, I realize that I have thrown my money away on brown industrial Mexican dirtweed, the worst pot I ever had, of no possible medical benefit to anyone. What would have been considered shit even in the 1970s. It's so brown that it may actually be from the 1970s. But make your point. That was
well, it's kind of interesting. I mean, every dispensary I've gone into, you go in there, and they have jars. There's plenty of lighting where you can tell. You can smell, you can see exactly what you're getting. Mm-hmm. And I will agree there are some places that are a little bit sketchy. Some of the people that are working back there probably aren't very well versed in what they're looking at, if it's indica, sativa, let alone whatever cannabinoids it might have in it, when it might be useful, right? And you'll see a lot of places like that where, hey, you buy the purple Urkel, you want the sour diesel, you want the marijuana, and it's all about trade names. And so what I don't understand is this, how he can buy something there and not notice it until he gets home.
Yeah, I mean, how bad it is until he gets home. Yeah,
that doesn't make any sense to me. And I kind of think maybe he's just disgruntled for whatever reason, and I think that kind of taints his article. I will admit though that there are some fly-by-night people up there.
Yeah. Well, it's like anything else. It's good and bad and everything, I guess. And there's 100 dispensaries, so they're going to have the gamut. But some of these really professional ones, like you mentioned, I've heard some of this talk about some of the products that are mind-blowing that you can get.
I can get active Dr. Pepper, and I mean it's $10 a bottle, but it works. It's good. You see all of that up there in Seattle. But what you're seeing more and more now, as problems like this have come up with patients, is that the better dispensaries, collectors, call it, whatever you want to call it, are actually testing everything. So you can go in there and make sure what you're buying from whoever you decide to go to, I want to see the paperwork. I want you to tell me what the THC, I want to know what the cannabinoids in this, I want to know what it is before I'm getting it, because I have specific needs. If you have people that have, you know, multiple sclerosis, they want to try the strands that are going to help them to battle the spasticity that they get. You know, I've seen people that have used this, they're contorted, and then they take a couple hits, and then you can just see them relax. You know, that was one of the first eye-openers to me 20 years ago, when it was still under the counter, below the radar, because we were just trying to help patients. You know, the medicine, the science was just coming of age, and now the last couple of years we've made just tremendous strides into being able to determine what's in your medicine. So wherever you are, you know, you should have the ability to test what you're buying. And if you go into a dispensary and they can't do that for you, I turn around and walk out the door, because there's another 99 dispensaries that are out there. The price won't vary, and you can get good, clean weed that'll fit your needs. And yeah, $18 for 2 grams, that's what you're going to pay. You can pay $25 for 2 grams, but at least you know what you're getting. Because you can go out there and you can find some stuff that, you know, is better served in the compost bin than in your pipe.
I know when they had that weed war, was it Weed Wars?
Weed Wars,
They had
yeah.
herbicide. That was interesting to really see how it operates and how they go about it.
What amazed me is just the scale of how they were operating. I mean, I watched the show just a few times. I know Steve D'Angelo. I've met him up at HempFest. Great guy. But then all these reality shows tend to try to stir the pot a little bit. We're going to show you I don't know, they show a side of people that really plays well to their audience, but doesn't show the people, like let's say at Harborside, in the best light. Right. You know, they want a little conflict. They want people to watch the show. They want to see, you know, almost a story unfold. And so with reality TV, you got to kind of force that reality to play out the way the producers wanted it to. And I remember watching it, go, okay, this is really stupid, maybe not good for the movement. Because they're showing just dysfunctional people, thefts and whatnot, which I know happened, but at the end of the day, he makes a comment about how much they did in a month, and I'm going, my God, you know, these people are making somebody's job really easy when you say how much money you make every month. You know, because biggest problem with, you know, working with patients in this is that you can't sell medical weed in a vacuum. There is money involved, you know, and if you want to get yourself on the radar, go on to the Discovery Channel, be on a show like Weed Wars, and then look out.
I know, it's like the Moonshiner show. I keep thinking, how are they getting away with that, you know? Cops must watch it too.
I don't watch much television anymore.
But anyway, but it's interesting to hear how things are going in Washington. I keep hoping that somebody will come in from Colorado and tell us what's going on in Colorado, but we don't know anybody.
Well, Washington is just ending up its first attempt at the liquor board's, how are we going to grow pot? How are we going to register this? How are we going to regulate it? And they're actually hiring the state of Washington outside consultants, because they don't know what they're looking at. You know, so they're actually, you know, $70,000 and $80,000 a year jobs. So you can tell the state liquor board, yeah, that's a really good weed right there. This isn't so much, you know. And so the public comment period ends in the middle of February, and then the next step is going to be the wholesalers, and then they're going to get to the retailers. So supposedly by the end of December of this year, they're going to be up and running, and the state liquor board is going to be licensing growers, they're going to be licensing wholesalers, they're going to be licensing retailers, and they're already doing this in Colorado in a more state-involved way, as where Washington is still kind of lagging behind. The state legislature is going to make another attempt to regulate the medical industry, as they tried again 2 years ago. So now we have a new governor, we have a new representative, you know, in all districts in Washington. So it's kind of a brave new world right now, watching this kind of happen and wondering, you know, what the White House is going to do. Obama said, hey, we got bigger fish to fry, and he certainly does. You know, but there's still stalwarts in the DEA and others that are just, no matter what the science, no matter what reality is, are still towing the line. Cannabis is just as dangerous as heroin. You know, that's from the DEA's own, you know, chief. So
right, yeah.
We still haven't heard back from the lawsuit that was heard in the appeals court back in D.C. for the Governors Association, trying to get the DEA to, you know, wake up to the world and say, hey, there is science out here. You guys are ignoring it. You're making it impossible for the 18 states that do have medical marijuana to be able to actually have a medical marijuana system that actually benefits patients. Where right now it's just every state's different. You can draw parallels between California and Washington, but Oregon's different completely, and it's sandwiched between two states where, I hate to use a bad term, but it is kind of like the Wild West up there, because they're being allowed to operate for the greater good, for the patients, which is what I love about King County and the officials in Seattle in particular, who have taken a very active approach and basically said, hey, you know, we want to see sick people get what they need. We don't want to hassle you over this, and they haven't. But at the same time, they get a lot of pressure from the Justice Department and all the other concerned entities that are up there, because you can open up any newspaper, you can, Seattle Times, you can see ads for weed in there. I mean, it's kind of incredible. The nickel ads, magazines, glossy magazines that are free, that are being supported by this. So it's, you know, I kind of pinch myself at times trying to figure out how quickly this is going to happen. And I think we'll know in the next month when the Justice Department says that they will comment.
I know just the last few years I've been amazed at the magazines coming out of California, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
Slick cover magazines, free, top drawer quality magazines, and I remember this one in particular. I remember the name of it, but it talked about the leading magazine and leading hemp magazine, and the only word hemp was on the cover in that title.
Right.
The rest of it was medical marijuana, the whole thing, cover to cover. It was all medical marijuana. But
one of the biggest magazines in King County is a magazine called Dope Magazine. I always kind of cringed at that. Why'd you have to name it Dope? Because you put a picture of somebody on the cover right below the header that says Dope. You know, and I just thought, well, okay, you know, maybe it's a little bit too highbrow for me to kind of wrap my brain around, but they're a great resource.
Yeah.
You can go on there, and of course it's advertised supported, but you can still read this thing on a monthly basis. It's free, and they have great links. They keep things up to date. HempFest writes a blog for them. We try to help them out as well. You know, and they are really trying to be more inclusive in King County, because that's what the movement needs right now. 502 divided a lot of people. I was one of them, you know, that had some doubts about it, but now it's up and running. And for ill or gain, here we go.
It'll be interesting to see what happens with the DOI deal. In fact, we got an article on that we're going to do later. First green or marijuana DOI under I-502, likely in the pipeline. So
not surprising.
It's just a matter of time. So we'll wait and see. That's why it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Washington and Colorado. See what we're going to. So we'll kind of see what we're going to do in Oregon. So. But yeah, that's great. Well, I appreciate you coming and letting us know on Washington, and I know you'll be back and keeping us updated.
I will be back.
And we're going to wind down here a little bit, and so far, yeah. But anyway, we got to get out of here, so we'll be back. We'll be back.
I'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye.
There are no double-blind studies, the gold standard of scientific tests, to have proven or even shown that marijuana does anything for kids with autism or OCD.
How young is too young to be using medicinal marijuana?
How young is too young to use aspirin? How young is too young to use penicillin?
A retired physician and professor at Harvard Medical School, Lester Grinspoon, wrote the book on marijuana. Literally. In the 70s, his son Danny, who had cancer, used the drug to counter the pain of his chemotherapy before his death.
I can't guarantee it's going to do anything, but I can tell you it isn't going to harm him. It is remarkably non-toxic.
You understand how some people hear of a boy taking marijuana and they're going, that doesn't seem right.
It's because we have been brainwashed about this substance. There will come a time when people will recognize that this is a wonder drug of our times. It does so much in terms of relieving some of the symptoms which are very difficult for parents to deal with, let alone the child.
I think the medical marijuana might actually be making their symptoms worse. The medical marijuana might just kind of be sedating them and not really addressing the underlying issues.
Child psychiatrist Dr. Steven Sager at the Echo Teen Substance Abuse Facility, argues that this alternative treatment does present a serious risk for these kids.
Welcome back. We're here for the second half of the Eugene Cannabis TV show, and we have our constant commentator, Reverend Will. Appreciate his insight and being here. First thing I want to talk about on this segment was our friend Jim Greig wrote a letter to the editor and had it published. Jim Greig is quite an inspiration. You know, he does more in the movement than most people do, and he's laying flat on his back.
Yep.
And does a heck of a job. So here's the letter he wrote. It says, marijuana revenue could aid sheriff. I was alarmed when I read that because of continued drops in funding, the Lane County Sheriff will be reducing bed usage at the jail again. I have a suggestion, and it's only one, and it's one many Oregonians have been advocating for years. Let's legalize marijuana. When we do, the only real question remaining these days is when we should use the revenue to fund sheriff services, including the jail. California's Mendocino County instituted a zip tie program for medical marijuana growers. The growers purchase a zip tie from the county sheriff for each plant in their garden, and the sheriff inspects the gardens. With only 1/4 the population of Lane County, Mendocino County raised more than $600,000. I can't think of a better way to bridge the public funding gap the Lane County Sheriff now faces. While a marijuana zip tie program may not completely fill the expected $10 million hole over the next 2 years in the sheriff's budget, it would help us back away from the funding crisis we all face now. Marijuana consumers aren't criminals, only violators of a really bad federal prohibition. We appreciate the crime-fighting services our sheriff's deputies provide. We just don't want them wasting resources chasing us for gardening. And that was written by Jim Greig. He's a member of Voter Power and the Board of Directors. So,
So to add to that, Jim, I just want you to know that I've gone to the mayor of both these cities. Did it quite a while ago, but considering the fact that I never got a response of any kind, I did that. I asked them about letting us have some way of getting income, and I mentioned the dispensary Harborside in Oakland that went to the city council and basically asked them to tax them, but they asked them to tax them within their means because they had excess over what they were doing, and mentioned not only the sheriffs but also the school systems. You know, Springfield and Eugene, Bethel, they could all use the help. So why they keep rejecting us when we keep offering them the open hand, I don't understand. It's a very sad scenario.
some time ago, I know there was a website, I haven't checked for a while, but there was a website called taxmeplease.com.
Right.
And that was the whole issue is, yeah, make it legal and love to have you tax it. Make it legal, leave me alone and tax it. It'd be fine.
Well, the downtown area is talking about having some kind of tax down there that would be supportive of what's going on. And we keep trying to say to these people who don't want to be taxed that they should jump on our bandwagon, but they won't as long as the federal government keeps putting out this lie about how bad marijuana is. I mean, they have no proof. I want to see the bodies lined up end to end that have died from smoking pot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they don't ever get started because there's none. It's just crazy. So here's another one with them, and when I talk about discrimination, which I haven't so much tonight, but we can start right here.
That's right. We mentioned this very briefly in the last segment regarding Washington. Go ahead.
With more than 130 arrests for suspected driving under the influence of drugs in the state, 16 in King County, since marijuana possession became legal on December 6th, it's likely the first DUI charge for driving while having a blood level of 5 nanograms or more of THC is in the pipeline. The blood samples from those suspected drug DUIs are currently at the state's toxicology lab and should be reported back to the law enforcement official within the next few weeks, said Sergeant Paul Erdahl, a spokesman for the Washington State Patrol. The state has made 1,355 alcohol DUI arrests with 240 in King County during the same period. A Seattle attorney whose practice consists solely of medical marijuana cases said more people are coming to him for help fighting charges of driving under the influence of marijuana even before the new limit took effect. I'm seeing 1 to 2 a month and have been for a year, attorney Aaron Pelly said. Prior to that, I didn't really see any. Pelly believes state patrol officers had been ramping up their enforcement of green DUIs in anticipation of the passage of I-502, the law making possession of up to an ounce of marijuana legal. And now that it's on the books, he suspects there's been a huge spike of number of people being tested. It's not very often you give law enforcement a tool and they don't use it, he said. I-502 established for the first time a limit for the amount of active THC, the chemical in pot that makes you high, you can have in your bloodstream while driving. 5 nanograms or more and you can be charged with a DUI. That part of the law was the most contentious among supporters of legal pot. Medical marijuana users worried that the establishment of a legal limit would lead to more arrests and convictions for DUI, even when the person with THC in the blood isn't high. And that's important for you to understand, because for all of you who think we've got it made now that we have medical, here's another one. You don't have to be high in order to show a high THC level within your body, because it is fat soluble and therefore it sits in your fatty cells for a long period of time. And so you could have smoked one day, 20 days later, you could still have a high registry of THC in your body if you're like myself, 6'3", 265 pounds. A lot of fat there, boys. You know, it's going to stay put, not going anywhere. So the architects of I-502 argued the limit makes sense because, 1, voters wanted to make sure people weren't driving high on all that legal pot, and 2, the body gets rid of active THC within hours of ingesting marijuana. Now see, there's another lie. There's a lie just like the one the federal government tells you when there's no medical benefits and you have people who have federal medical cards, and in addition to that you have people who are cancer patients and dialysis patients, both of which use marijuana to help keep their food, get their food into them in the first place and then keep it down. So if we could ever get our government to be accountable for the statements that they make, we might be able to make a difference. So it says even heavy marijuana users like medical marijuana patients should have their THC levels drop below 5 nanograms if they wait a few hours before driving. Not true. I'm sorry. That's just a blatant lie. Nevertheless, Pelly said that the law has made his job harder because before there was a legal limit like the .08 limit for alcohol, he could argue that his clients were not appreciably affected by the drug in their system. But with the limit, that argument is harder to make. In fact, get caught with over 5 nanograms in your blood and you're considered impaired per se or in fact. Pelly adds, however, defense lawyers can still challenge the charge based on the probable cause an officer established to make you take the blood test in the first place. Before the law, just having marijuana in the vehicle or smelling like it could be probable cause. Now, though, officers have to use their full battery of tests to establish probable cause for a driver being appreciably affected or driving under the influence.
That's right, and that's something in Oregon you have to be aware of, is the DRE. Are you familiar?
Oh, yeah, I
the
know
drug
about
recognition
the DRE.
expert. An officer goes to a class, I think it's a 40-hour class. Upon completing the course, he becomes a DRE, drug recognition expert. And by just looking at you, he can determine the probability that you might be under the influence of drugs and can suggest you further, further testing. And our attorney friend Brian Michaels was in here one time and on our show, and we were discussing this, and what he was telling us is it's a simple little rhyme to remember. No to D-R-E, yes to P. And what that means is that if you're encountered to get pulled over and they ask you if you would submit to a DRE evaluation, you say no. No matter what they tell you, no matter how much pressure they put on you, no to DRE. But if they tell you that you have to pee, you do have to pee, but you have grounds to beat it because you said no to DRE. It's just like probable cause. If you give Brian also told us that if they find something in your trunk and you gave them permission, he said, there's nothing I can do for you. But if you do not give them permission and they find it, he says, then I got something to work with. So never submit to a search. And again, no matter what they do to intimidate you, never submit to a search. They may do it anyway, but if you don't submit, don't submit to it, they have grounds to fight.
That's crazy. So, here we go. Are you ready for this one? This is, can the DEA hide a surveillance camera on your land? Boy, with all the people fighting so hard to have a right to have weapons in their worlds, I don't know about this DEA going on the land and putting on a camera.
Yeah, so the U.S., it was okay for the DEA to enter the rural property without a warrant and install surveillance cameras that were used to help convict 5 members of a family on charges they were growing marijuana. So it's an interesting case, and we'll see how that comes out.
Right. Well, the attorneys say they're prepared to take the case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And in their motion, they had asked the court to suppress evidence because of the property's locked gate and no trespassing sign. Since the properties were heavily wooded and posted with signs, the owners were entitled to an expectation of privacy, the attorney said. After sentencing, the first round of appeals will go to the 7th Circuit, and if there's no favorable ruling there, the cases will be filed into the U.S. Supreme Court. That's when it says that's one action that could be recorded on their own property, even if the property is not within the curtilage, is contrary to society's concept of privacy.